When I look back now, it's strange how love can blind you so completely that you can't see the cracks forming right beneath your feet. At that time, I truly believed I was living every girl's dream. Married to Ethan Callahan, the charismatic CEO everyone admired. He was magnetic in every sense, with that confident smile and the kind of voice that could make any room go quiet when he spoke. When he looked at me, it felt like the world paused, and I foolishly thought that meant I was special. We had the perfect apartment, the kind people photograph for lifestyle magazines, a sleek glass balcony overlooking the city, soft white curtains that danced with the morning light, and 2 cups of coffee that always went cold because we were too busy. But somewhere between his meetings, phone calls, and late-night emails, my laughter stopped echoing. It started with small things. The way Ethan's eyes stayed on his phone, longer than on me. The way he began forgetting our dinner plans. And the way he smiled at texts he didn't want me to see. He had explanations for everything, always delivered with that charming ease. "You're overthinking, Liana," he'd say, kissing my forehead, and I'd smile back, pretending to believe him. But my heart had already begun collecting fragments of doubt. He worked late, so late that sometimes I'd fall asleep on the couch waiting for him, only to wake up to the sound of the door unlocking at 3 a.m. When I asked who he was with, he'd laugh lightly. "The client dinner ran long, babe. You know how it is." I wanted to trust him. God, I wanted to. Because love isn't just about passion. It's about faith, right? But faith without truth is like holding sand. No matter how tightly you grip, it slips through your fingers. The moment I started losing mine was the night I found a perfume that wasn't mine on his blazer. It wasn't the faint scent of a colleague's hug. It lingered too deeply, too personally. My chest tightened, but I didn't confront him right away. I told myself it was paranoia, that maybe I'd just imagined it. That's what love does. It teaches you how to lie to yourself. One evening, we were at a company event. Everyone was dressed to impress, and Ethan, of course, was the center of attention. His laughter filled the room, confident and intoxicating. Standing beside him, I noticed his eyes drift, not toward me, but toward a woman across the hall. Her name was Sabrina, a marketing manager I vaguely remembered from college. She was stunning, tall, graceful, with that effortless kind of charm that drew people in. When she walked toward us, Ethan's expression shifted, just slightly, into something I hadn't seen before. It was admiration. I smiled politely as she greeted me like an old friend, her tone sugary sweet, though her eyes flickered briefly with something smug. And when Ethan introduced me, my wife Liana, the pause before wife was just long enough to slice something inside me. That night, I told him I felt uncomfortable. He laughed it off. "Sabrina, you're kidding, right? She's just an old colleague. Don't be insecure, babe." Insecure. That word stung more than any insult. I stayed quiet, even though I knew deep down that something had shifted between us. He used to hold my hand during car rides. Now he scrolled through his phone. He used to call me my lucky charm. Now I was Liana, just Liana. There was one person who noticed. The only one who ever truly did. Noah. He was an architect I'd worked with years ago. Quiet, gentle, and endlessly kind. He'd once confessed feelings for me, but I'd turned him down because I thought I was already in love with my forever. We'd remained friends, occasionally exchanging messages about work or life. When he saw me at a cafe one afternoon, I must have looked as fragile as I felt. He smiled softly and said, "You look tired. You've been carrying too much again, haven't you?" I wanted to cry right there, not because of what he said, but because of how genuine it sounded. Ethan never noticed things like that anymore. I brushed it off, saying I was fine. But Noah's eyes lingered on mine for a moment longer, like he could see through every carefully constructed lie I was living behind. "You deserve peace, Liana," he said quietly before leaving, And that sentence haunted me for weeks. Ethan, of course, didn't like Noah. He called him the quiet loser, the guy with no ambition. I used to laugh it off, but lately, his words started sounding like insecurity, not confidence. Maybe Ethan saw something in Noah he lacked, kindness that didn't need to be proven. The night it all began to crumble, Ethan came home smelling like her perfume again. I asked where he was. Out with clients, he said. You're wearing her scent, I whispered. He froze, just for a second, before scoffing. You're paranoid, Liana. This is getting ridiculous. And then he walked away, into the shower, into his lies, into the distance that kept growing between us. That night, I stood by the window, staring at the city lights reflecting on the glass. They looked so perfect, so constant, but I knew the truth now. Perfection was just a reflection, beautiful from afar, hollow up close. And as I looked at my own reflection in the glass, the realization hit me like a punch. I was losing myself in the name of love. If only I had known that soon, I'd lose everything. My marriage, my life, and then I'd get a second chance. It's strange how betrayal never comes with thunder or lightning. It comes quietly, like a shadow that slips in unnoticed until it's sitting beside you. For weeks after that night, I pretended everything was fine. I smiled, cooked dinner, laughed at Ethan's stories, even though every word felt like glass cutting my throat. I wanted to believe he'd stop lying if I gave him no reason to. But betrayal doesn't stop because you love harder. It grows because you do. The final confirmation came on an ordinary Thursday. I had just returned from work early, exhausted, but excited to surprise Ethan with a homemade dinner. The apartment smelled of fresh pasta sauce and garlic bread when my phone buzzed. An unknown number sent me a photo. It was Ethan, sitting at a restaurant, his hand intertwined with Sabrina's, his smile soft, tender, the kind he used to give only to me. The caption underneath read, "He looks happier with me, doesn't he?" My heart stopped. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. The room spun around me, but the only thing I could see was his hand that used to wipe my tears. Now holding hers, when he came home that night, I was waiting at the table, the food now cold and untouched. He walked in with that same confident smile, smelling faintly of her perfume again. I held up my phone wordlessly, showing him the picture. For the first time, I saw fear flicker across his face, but only for a second before he recovered. "It's not what it looks like," he said flatly. "You're overreacting. Sabrina was going through something. I was just there for her." By holding her hand, I asked, my voice trembling. "Liana," he sighed, rubbing his temples. "You always make everything dramatic. Why can't you trust me?" That word, trust, it shattered something inside me. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone at him, to cry until my voice broke. But instead, I sat there in silence, feeling my heart detach itself piece by piece. I realized in that moment that love doesn't die in explosions. It dies in quiet moments of disbelief. For days, we lived like strangers. He stopped coming home most nights, and when he did, he barely looked at me. I stopped asking where he'd been because I already knew. Every lie he told was a brick building a wall between us, and soon, I couldn't even see him through it. One evening, I drove to his office, hoping to talk, to fight, to fix, to do something. But when I reached the parking lot, I froze. Through the tinted glass of his car, I saw them, Ethan and Sabrina, laughing, kissing, her hands on his chest, his fingers tangled in her hair. My chest felt like it was caving in. The world blurred into a smear of headlights and rain as tears stung my eyes. I don't even remember driving home. I only remember the sound of my own sobs, echoing in that empty apartment. I didn't eat for 2 days. When Noah called to ask if I was okay, I lied, saying I was busy. but he must have heard the crack in my voice. The next morning, he showed up at my door with breakfast and quiet concern. He didn't ask questions. He just sat with me, in silence, letting me cry. When I finally looked up at him, his eyes were filled with something so steady, so patient, that it made me feel small for ever mistaking cruelty for strength. I thought love meant staying. I whispered, "Even when it hurts." He shook his head gently. "Love isn't supposed to hurt, Liana. Pain isn't proof of devotion." His words stayed with me long after he left. But still, I wasn't ready to let go. I told myself Ethan would realize his mistake, that he'd remember what we had. That night, when he finally came home, I waited. I asked him softly, "Do you still love me?" He stared at me, expression unreadable. "You're making this difficult, Liana," he said. "You've changed. You're not the woman I married." "I had to change," I said, tears burning my eyes. "Because the woman you married wasn't enough for you, was she?" He looked away, muttering, "Sabrina understands me." That was it. The sentence that ended everything. I didn't shout. I didn't break anything. I just stopped fighting. Because what's the point of holding on to someone who already let go? The days blurred after that. I worked. I slept. I cried. My reflection in the mirror became a stranger's. My voice sounded hollow. My smile mechanical. My body was alive, but my soul was somewhere buried under all the lies I had tried to forgive. When my eyes flooded open, I expected the sharp sting of hospital lights, the mechanical rhythm of beeping machines, the sterile scent of antiseptic and death. But instead, I heard birdsong. Morning sunlight spilled across a familiar room, one I hadn't seen in years. My old apartment, the tiny one-bedroom I'd lived in before marrying Ethan. My heart pounded in confusion. My hand trembled as I touched my face. No bruises, no bandages, no pain. Everything looked untouched, whole. I turned toward the mirror on the wall and froze. My reflection was younger. My hair was longer, my skin softer. It wasn't possible, but there it was. I was back. At first, I thought it was a cruel dream, a desperate illusion crafted by my dying mind. But when I reached for my phone, the date on the screen shattered any doubt. 5 years earlier, before Ethan and I ever got married. Before the lies, before the accident, I stared at the screen until my breath came in shaky bursts. Was this a second chance? 1,000 emotions collided inside me. Shock, fear, disbelief, and an ache so deep, it felt like my bones were remembering what my mind hadn't yet processed. I thought of all the nights I had cried myself to sleep, begging for another chance, to live differently, to stop being so blind. And here it was, a gift, or maybe a test. Either way, I wasn't going to waste it. My phone buzzed with a message. "Ethan, lunch today. I've got something to ask you." I knew exactly what that message was about. That was the day he'd proposed to me. I remembered it vividly. The candlelit restaurant, the ring, the way my heart had nearly burst with joy. In that life, I'd said yes without hesitation. But this time, my hands didn't tremble from excitement. They trembled from clarity. When I met Ethan that afternoon, the scene unfolded exactly as I remembered. The same expensive restaurant, the same dim lighting, the same charming grin on his face. He reached across the table, his voice dripping with practiced affection. "Liana, we've been together for a while now. I think it's time we take the next step." In my previous life, my answer came instantly. "Yes." This time, I smiled faintly and said, "I'll think about it." Ethan blinked, visibly thrown off. "Think about it?" He laughed awkwardly. "You're kidding, right?" I just stirred my drink, meeting his gaze with quiet calm. "You're used to everyone saying yes to you, aren't you, Ethan?" His smile faltered. I could almost see the irritation flash behind his eyes, before he masked it again. "I just didn't expect hesitation," he said smoothly. "I thought we were happy." Maybe we are, I said softly. But I need to make sure I'm marrying someone who values honesty more than appearances. For the first time, Ethan had no script ready. He stared at me like I'd suddenly become someone he didn't know. And maybe I had, because the woman sitting before him now wasn't the naive girl who believed love meant forgiveness. She was someone who had died once, someone who'd learned the price of blind devotion. After lunch, I walked through the city streets, my thoughts swirling like wind. Everything was the same. Familiar cafes, the bookstore I loved, the corner where Noah used to wait for his bus. My steps slowed when I saw him. Noah. He looked exactly as I remembered. Gentle smile. Glasses slightly askew. A quiet calm that made the world feel less chaotic. He hadn't noticed me yet. For a moment, I just watched him, feeling my heart swell with a strange mixture of nostalgia and gratitude. In my previous life, I had brushed him aside. I thought stability was boring, that passion came only from storms. But I was wrong. Real love doesn't roar, it whispers. When he finally noticed me, his face lit up. "Liana, it's been ages," he said warmly. I smiled. "It feels like a lifetime." He laughed softly. Still as dramatic as ever, we talked briefly about work, about life. But even in that short conversation, I could feel it again. His sincerity, his patience, his quiet strength. When he said goodbye, he added gently, "Take care of yourself, okay? You always forget to." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Ethan's smirk, Noah's eyes, and the echo of the life I'd already lived once. This time, I had the knowledge of what would come, the affair, the pain, the accident. I could change everything. I stood by the window, the same view I'd once dreamed of escaping, and whispered to myself, "This time I won't beg to be loved. This time I'll choose differently." I picked up my phone and opened Ethan's message thread. My fingers hovered for a moment before typing. "Ethan, I've been thinking. Let's slow things down," he replied almost immediately. "What's wrong, babe?" I smiled faintly. Everything that used to be right. I didn't know where this path would take me, but one thing was certain. This time, I wouldn't end my story in the wreckage of a broken heart. This time I'd rewrite it. And maybe, just maybe, I'd find the peace that Noah once said I deserved. The days that followed felt strangely liberating, as if I'd been walking around for years with invisible chains, and someone had finally unlocked them. Ethan's reaction to my sudden coolness was predictable. Confusion first, then irritation. He wasn't used to me taking space or setting boundaries. In my past life, I had hung on to his every word, laughed at every joke, apologized for things I hadn't even done. But now, when he called, I didn't rush to answer. When he texted, I took hours to respond. And when we met, I listened more than I spoke, studying him with the clarity of someone who'd already seen his final act. At first, Ethan turned on the charm, as though my distance were a challenge he needed to conquer. He sent flowers, took me to expensive dinners, and told me how much he admired my independence. But it wasn't admiration. It was confusion, wrapped in flattery. He couldn't grasp that I wasn't performing for him anymore. He'd fallen in love with the version of me who adored him unconditionally. He didn't know what to do with a woman who no longer needed his approval. Meanwhile, my career began to flourish in ways it hadn't before. I had always been a talented designer, but back then, my creativity had lived in Ethan's shadow. He'd often said, "You're good, babe, but design isn't a serious career. Why stress over something so uncertain?" And I'd believed him. I'd put his dreams above my own, shrinking myself to fit into the outline of his ambition. But now, with my mind clear and my heart unshackled, my ideas flowed like water. I stayed up late sketching, pouring emotion into my work, pieces that reflected strength, rebirth, and quiet defiance. It wasn't long before an architecture firm noticed my designs online. When I arrived for the meeting, I froze at the sight of the lead architect, Noah. Fate, it seemed, wasn't done intertwining our paths. He looked surprised to see me, but genuinely happy. "Liana," he said, standing to greet me. "It's been too long. It really has," I said, smiling softly. "Guess fate likes recycling old souls." He laughed. That gentle, unhurried sound I remembered. Working with him was effortless. Where Ethan had always imposed, Noah collaborated. He valued my input, asked questions, and listened like every detail mattered. For the first time, I felt seen not as someone's wife, or girlfriend, or accessory, but as a person with her own light. The way he treated people was so different from Ethan's smooth arrogance. Noah didn't try to impress. He simply existed with quiet confidence. One afternoon, as we reviewed blueprints, he looked at me curiously and said, "You seem different, Liana. Stronger, happier." I hesitated, smiling faintly. "Maybe I finally learned what I don't want." He nodded knowingly. "That's how we start finding what we do." Those words lingered. The truth was, I hadn't planned to fall into anything new. My heart was still wary, still healing from scars that hadn't yet faded. But Noah's presence wasn't intrusive. It was steady. He didn't demand space in my life. He simply became a part of it, naturally, gently. Ethan noticed, of course. One evening, he came to pick me up after work and saw Noah and me walking out of the office together. Noah was carrying my sketch portfolio, and we were laughing about something small. Nothing romantic, just easy conversation. But the moment Ethan saw us, his jaw tightened. Later that night, he brought it up. "So," he said casually, "you and that guy, Noah, right? You seem pretty close." "He's my colleague," I replied evenly. "Colleague?" His tone carried that familiar edge of mockery. "I remember him. The quiet one. Didn't he have a thing for you back in the day?" I met his eyes calmly. "Maybe. He was kind to me when you weren't." Ethan's smirk faltered. "You're comparing me to him. Come on, Liana. He's harmless. Not exactly the kind of guy who can keep up with you." I smiled slightly. Maybe that's the point. His expression darkened. "You're not funny." I wasn't joking. He stared at me for a long moment, studying me, like a stranger he couldn't quite read. Then he laughed, shaking his head. "You've changed, babe. I don't know what's gotten into you, but I miss the old you." I looked at him with a softness that wasn't love anymore. It was farewell in disguise. "You miss the version of me who didn't see your lies." The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time, Ethan didn't have a comeback. I think that unsettled him more than anger ever could. As weeks passed, my connection with Noah deepened. Not in a fiery, dramatic way, but in quiet moments of understanding. He never tried to fix me. He simply gave me space to be. When he learned about my dream of starting my own design studio, he offered to help me draft the layout. When I hesitated, unsure if I was ready, he said, "You don't have to be ready. You just have to start." One evening, after finishing a long presentation, we found ourselves sitting side by side on the office balcony. The city lights glittered below us, distant but comforting. "Ethan doesn't deserve you," he said quietly, almost as if speaking to himself. "I know," I whispered, "but I used to think I did." Noah turned to me, eyes reflecting the city's glow. "You've always deserved better, Liana. You just forgot for a while." His words felt like balm to an old wound. For the first time in years, maybe in both lives, I breathed without pain. Meanwhile, Ethan grew increasingly frustrated. My detachment, once mistaken for indifference, now made him insecure. He started dropping by my workplace unannounced, sending expensive gifts, even posting couple photos on social media to mark his territory. But it was too late. The version of me he was trying to claim no longer existed. One night, as I stared at the message he'd just sent, "Let's go away this weekend. Just us. Like old times." I smiled faintly and deleted it without replying. Because old times were gone. And this time, I was finally writing my own story. It's funny how silence becomes the loudest language when love begins to fade. Ethan's calls, once my lifeline, now felt like distant echoes I didn't need to answer. His presence had become a habit I was finally unlearning. Each morning, I woke with a sense of calm that once felt impossible. A calm born not from someone's love, but from my own freedom. My apartment was small, quiet, filled with light and soft music instead of tension. And every time I picked up a pencil to sketch, it felt like breathing again. Noah and I started working more closely. Our collaboration for the new cultural center became the talk of the firm. Our designs seemed to flow as if we shared one mind. He was steady where I was emotional, thoughtful where I was impulsive. Sometimes he'd bring me coffee just the way I liked it, without even asking, and when I'd thank him, he'd just smile and say, "You remember everyone else's needs. Liana, it's about time someone remembered yours." His quiet understanding unnerved me in the gentlest way possible. Meanwhile, Ethan couldn't understand what was happening. His texts turned from charming to desperate. "You've been distant lately," he wrote one night. "Is something wrong?" I stared at the screen, unsure how to explain that nothing was wrong anymore. That was the problem. I simply didn't feel the chaos that used to define us. I didn't need his validation, his approval, or his attention. I had stopped craving the very things I used to beg for. I was finally at peace. When we met for dinner later that week, he looked frustrated. "You're different," he said, scanning my face. "Colder. Is there someone else?" I smiled faintly. "There doesn't need to be someone else for me to stop being miserable." "Don't play games with me, Liana." His voice sharpened. "You think that architect can replace me?" I set down my fork. Noah doesn't want to replace anyone. That's the difference. Ethan scoffed, leaning back. "He's not your type. You'll get bored. Guys like him are too safe, too predictable. You need someone exciting." I met his gaze, my tone steady. Exciting isn't the same as exhausting. For a moment, he just stared at me, his arrogance cracking. Then he laughed bitterly. "You're acting like some kind of saint now, but you used to chase me like I was your whole world." "I did," I said softly. "But that world ended the moment you chose someone else in it." He went silent. I think that's when it hit him, that he couldn't charm his way back into my heart. That his old tricks, the ones that used to work so easily, were useless now. The power he once had over me had dissolved, replaced by something he couldn't manipulate. Detachment. A week later, our company was invited to present at a national design conference. Noah and I went together as part of the project team. The event was elegant and intimidating. Professionals from across the country, journalists, investors, critics. I was nervous, but Noah's calm presence grounded me. "You've done harder things," he whispered, before we walked on stage. "You survived what tried to break you. This is nothing." We presented beautifully. The audience applauded. For the first time, I felt proud. Not because someone loved me, but because I loved what I'd built. That night, as we stepped outside into the cool air, Noah handed me a small notebook. "For your next ideas," he said, smiling. "You always have more in you than you think." I flipped through the first page, and he'd written something inside. "To the woman who finally remembered her worth." My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. Not this time. When Ethan found out about the conference, his reaction was predictable. He called, sounding agitated. "So, you and Noah are traveling together now. That's professional." "Perfectly," I replied calmly. "Don't test me, Liana," he snapped. "You're mine." The words hit me like ice. I'd once found comfort in them. Now, they just sounded like a chain. I said quietly. "But not anymore." He hung up without another word. The next day, I received an anonymous email. Photos of Ethan and Sabrina at a hotel. I didn't need to guess who sent them. Maybe Sabrina wanted to humiliate me, or maybe Ethan wanted to test my reaction. Either way, the outcome was the same. I didn't feel anything. No rage, no heartbreak, just relief, because I'd already seen this movie once before, and this time, I knew the ending. When Ethan showed up at my place later that evening, pretending nothing was wrong, I met him at the door. "You can stop lying," I said simply. He frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Sabrina. The hotel. You haven't even changed your cologne since last time." He went still. "Liana, please. It's not like that." "Maybe it is," I said softly. "But I don't care anymore." His mouth opened, but no words came. He looked at me like I'd just vanished before his eyes. And maybe I had. The version of me who begged for answers, who clung to him through the pain, was gone. I smiled faintly. "You're free, Ethan. So am I." And with that, I closed the door. Inside, the silence was pure, not empty. I sank onto the couch and let the peace wash over me. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I'd finally detached from the idea that love had to hurt to be real. That night, Noah texted me. "I heard something happened. You okay?" I replied, for the first time, yes, and I meant it. Because letting go wasn't losing. It was winning back myself. The weeks that followed felt strangely weightless. No more silent tears at 2 a.m. No more waiting for texts that never came. No more explaining why I deserved to be treated right. My world had shrunk to the things that truly mattered. My work, my peace, and the people who valued me without conditions. Noah had quietly become one of them. His presence was never overwhelming, never demanding, just steady, like sunlight after a storm you thought would never end. But life has a way of testing your peace, just when you start to believe it's permanent. Ethan began to spiral. He showed up at my office one afternoon, unannounced, looking disheveled and angry. "You're really doing this?" he asked, slamming his palm against my desk. "You're just pretending none of it mattered?" I took a slow breath, keeping my tone calm. "I'm not pretending, I'm accepting," he scoffed, pacing like a caged animal. "You think that fancy architect cares about you? He's just playing a game. You're naive if you think he's different." I folded my arms. "He doesn't have to be perfect, just honest. Something you never were." His jaw tightened. "You think you're better than me now?" "No," I said softly. "I just think I'm better without you." That must have hit him, because for the first time, Ethan didn't have a comeback. His eyes softened, his voice breaking slightly. "You really don't love me anymore." I hesitated. Once, that question would have torn me apart. Now it just made me sad. "I'll always remember who you were to me," I said. "But that's not love anymore. It's just a lesson." He stared at me for a long moment, then left without another word. I didn't see him again for weeks. In that quiet space he left behind, Noah slowly filled the air. He wasn't trying to replace anyone. He just showed up when I needed advice, when I was too exhausted to think, when I doubted myself. He'd bring over takeout, sit on my couch, and ask about my day like it mattered. It was effortless, natural. I'd forgotten love could feel that way. One evening, after we wrapped up a late project, Noah walked me home. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, and the air smelled like rain. We paused under a street lamp, and he looked at me for a long moment. "You know," he said, "you've changed since I met you." "How so?" I asked. "You used to look like you were holding your breath all the time," he said with a half smile. "Now you breathe freely." I laughed softly. Maybe I just stopped trying to breathe for two people. He smiled, but his eyes were tender. "Good, because you deserve someone who breathes with you." Something flooded inside me, warm and cautious. For the first time in so long, my heart didn't ache. It glowed. But I wasn't ready yet. Healing doesn't follow a calendar, it follows courage. And mine was still growing. A few days later, I attended a company gala. It was one of those glamorous events, filled with champagne and whispered gossip. Noah was there, effortlessly handsome in his dark suit. As we laughed over something silly, a familiar chill ran down my spine. I felt eyes on me. I turned, and there he was. Ethan, dressed impeccably, a beautiful woman on his arm. Sabrina, of course. They looked like the perfect couple, the kind that could grace a magazine cover. But his gaze was locked on me, unreadable, sharp. He walked over with that same smug confidence that used to make my heart race. "Liana," he greeted, his tone smooth. "You look different." I smiled politely. "Different suits me," he smirked. "And who's this?" "Noah," I said simply. "My partner." Something flickered in his expression. Jealousy? Disbelief? Maybe both. He looked at Noah, then back at me. "I see. You moved on fast." I tilted my head. "No, Ethan. I just stopped waiting." Sabrina laughed, looping her arm through his. "Come on, Ethan, don't make it awkward." But the awkwardness wasn't mine. It was his. For once, he was the one standing on the outside of my story. That night, Noah and I danced under the soft golden lights. His hand on my back was firm, grounding, safe. Ethan watched from across the room, his smile strained, his eyes dark with something I recognized all too well, regret. Later, as the evening wound down, Noah walked me to the car. "He doesn't get to look at you like that," he murmured quietly. I smiled, touched by his protectiveness. "Let him. Maybe he's finally seeing what he lost." Noah met my gaze, his eyes steady. "He didn't lose you, Liana. He threw you away." The words hit deep, not because they hurt, but because they were true. When I got home, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. Not the broken woman who begged for love, but the one who rebuilt herself piece by piece. The reflection staring back at me wasn't defined by betrayal anymore. She was defined by survival, by strength, by self-respect. That was the night I realized something profound. Sometimes, the breaking point isn't the end of the story. It's the moment your real story begins. And though I didn't know it yet, my story was about to take a turn that would make Ethan's world crumble in ways he never expected. Regret has a smell. It's sharp, heavy, almost metallic. I caught a whiff of it the next morning when I arrived at work and found Ethan waiting in the lobby. He looked exhausted, as if he hadn't slept in days. Gone was the arrogant smirk he always wore like armor. Instead, there was a man stripped of certainty, standing in the ruins of his own choices. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. Eyes pleading, I hesitated. My instinct told me to walk away, but curiosity, old, tired, and still human, made me nod. We stepped outside into the courtyard. The morning air crisp with the scent of blooming jasmine. He shoved his hands into his pockets, searching for the right words. "I shouldn't have shown up at the gala," he said. "Seeing you with him, it messed me up. I didn't realize how much His voice cracked. How much I still care. I studied him for a long moment. There it was, the confession I once begged for. But it didn't feel like healing. It felt like closure. "Ethan," I said softly, "you don't get to care after you made me stop believing you ever did." He flinched. "I made mistakes, I know. Sabrina meant nothing. It was stupid. I was stupid. But I thought after everything, you'd at least hear me out." I shook my head slowly. "You're not sorry you hurt me. You're sorry you lost control of me." That hit him harder than I expected. His shoulders slumped, his voice breaking into something raw. "I thought you'd forgive me like before. I thought we could start over." I met his gaze steadily. "I did start over, Ethan, just not with you." He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. And maybe he was. The woman who once worshipped him was gone, replaced by someone he couldn't manipulate or charm. When I turned to leave, his voice trembled. Do you love him? The question hung in the air like smoke. I paused, then said, I don't know yet, but I know he respects me, and that's more love than you ever gave. I walked away, my heels clicking against the pavement. A sound that felt like punctuation at the end of a chapter I'd spent years writing in tears. Later that night, Noah and I met for dinner. I didn't tell him about Ethan. I didn't need to. Somehow he already knew. He always seemed to. Over pasta and quiet conversation, he said, You've been quieter than usual. I saw Ethan. I admitted. He regrets it. He wants to talk. Noah set down his fork, studying me carefully. And what do you want? I thought for a moment. Peace, and I already have it. He smiled softly. Then don't let him take it back. There was something in his eyes that night, a quiet sincerity that reached me deeper than words. He didn't try to claim me, didn't make promises or confessions. He just was there, constant, kind, patient, and that somehow was enough to make my walls tremble. Weeks passed, and the project we'd been working on neared completion. The board announced a company-wide celebration, and Noah was invited to speak as lead designer. I was so proud watching him command the stage with quiet grace. When he mentioned my name as his creative partner and inspiration, my heart stumbled. The applause that followed wasn't just for our success. It was for the unspoken bond that everyone could sense, but no one dared name. After the event, we went to the rooftop for some air. The city lights stretched endlessly beneath us, glowing like promises. Noah leaned on the railing, looking out. You ever think about how strange life is? He said. How you can lose everything you thought you wanted, only to find what you actually needed. I nodded. Every day, he turned to me, eyes gentle. You don't have to say anything, but if you ever want to stop running from what you deserve, I'm here. It wasn't a confession. It was an invitation, and something inside me shifted quietly, like a locked door opening for the first time. Then, just as life started to feel safe again, everything changed. One morning, an anonymous message landed in my inbox. A photo of Noah and me together at the rooftop party, attached to a caption, Sleeping your way to the top, Liana. Some habits die hard. My heart dropped. I knew that voice, even before I saw the signature. Sabrina. Within hours. The gossip spread through the office like wildfire. Ethan's PR firm got wind of it, and suddenly whispers followed me wherever I went. I saw Ethan later that afternoon, storming toward me, his face flushed with anger. What the hell is this, Liana? You're dating him while still working together. You think that's professional? I laughed bitterly. You cheated on me with your secretary, Ethan. Don't lecture me on professionalism. That's different. He snapped. You're making a fool of yourself, of us. There is no us, I said firmly. The argument escalated, voices rising until Noah appeared between us. That's enough, he said calmly, stepping protectively in front of me. Ethan's jaw tightened. Stay out of this. No, Noah said evenly. You don't get to humiliate her because you can't handle the consequences of your own mistakes. The air was electric. Two men, one who had broken me and one who was helping me heal, stood on opposite sides of my story. Ethan glared at him. You really think she'll choose you over me? Noah smiled faintly. She doesn't have to choose, Ethan. She already did. Ethan turned to me, his expression desperate, almost pleading. Liana, tell him he's wrong. But I didn't. I just looked at him and said quietly, You're right about one thing, Ethan. I forgave you once before, but not this time. His face crumpled, and he walked away without another word. I stood there, shaking slightly, and Noah's hand found mine. You okay? He whispered. I nodded slowly. I think so. For the first time, I actually am. In that moment, I realized something profound. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in. It's about letting yourself move on. And while Ethan drowned in his regret, I was already learning to breathe again, in a love that didn't need pain to prove it was real. Peace is a strange thing. It arrives quietly, but once you have it, you start guarding it like treasure. The storm with Ethan had finally passed, and for the first time in years, my life wasn't defined by chaos. Work was thriving, the gossip at the office had faded, and Noah had become my constant. He wasn't someone who filled silence with grand words. He filled it with understanding, with calm, with presence. We spent our evenings walking through the park after work, laughing about little things, sharing dreams that felt real for once. He told me about his mother's garden, how she always said love was like soil. You had to tend to it, but not smother it. I told him about my childhood sketches, the ones I used to draw of cities made entirely of light. We didn't need to impress each other. We simply existed together, effortlessly. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was healing. One weekend, Noah invited me to visit his hometown for his cousin's wedding. I hesitated at first. It felt like a step into something deeper. But when he said, "Come, Liana, you deserve to be surrounded by joy again," I couldn't refuse. The trip was a breath of fresh air, literally and emotionally. His family was warm, kind, and full of laughter. They adored him, and soon, they adored me too. Watching Noah with them made me see sides of him I hadn't before. The way he carried love effortlessly, without ego or demand. That night, after the wedding, we sat on a hill overlooking the town lights. The music from the reception drifted faintly through the air. He glanced at me, his voice low. "I don't know what I did to deserve meeting you." I smiled softly. "Maybe you were just in the right place when I finally stopped running." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You've been through hell. Liana, you don't owe anyone an explanation for wanting peace." I looked into his eyes, the kind of gaze that steadies you even when the world spins, and something inside me clicked. I realized I didn't just care for him. I trusted him. He leaned closer, slow and certain, and when his lips met mine, it didn't feel like a spark. It felt like coming home. No fireworks, no noise, just warmth, steady and true. But fate, as always, has its own cruel rhythm. When we returned to the city, I found an envelope waiting on my doorstep. No name, no return address, just my name written in a familiar hand. Inside was a single photograph. Ethan, sitting in a hospital bed, pale and bruised. A note attached read, "He's been in an accident. He asked for you." My heart dropped. I stood there frozen, staring at the photo until the edges trembled in my hands. For a moment, everything blurred. The memories, the anger, the forgiveness. He had been cruel, yes, but he had also once been my everything. Noah saw the photo when I showed him. He went quiet, then said gently, "You should go, not because you owe him, but because closure sometimes comes in unexpected forms." That night, I went to the hospital. The smell of antiseptic and faint hum of machines filled the room where Ethan lay, bandaged and weak. His eyes fluttered open when he heard me step in. For a moment, disbelief crossed his face, then relief. "You came," he whispered. I nodded, standing by the door. "You asked for me." He smiled faintly. "Guess some habits don't die, huh?" My heart clenched. "How did it happen?" "Car crash. My fault," he said weakly. "Sabrina left. Figures." He tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. I moved closer, handing him some water. His hand brushed mine, trembling. "I kept thinking about you," he murmured. "About how I ruined everything. I thought I'd have time to fix it. Then this happened. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to walk away, but another part, older, softer, just felt sorry for him. Not because I still loved him, but because he had never learned to love right." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. Liana, do you think people can change? I swallowed. Yes, but not always in time. He closed his eyes, a single tear slipping down his cheek. I thought you'd forgive me after everything, like before. I sighed softly. I did forgive you, Ethan. That's why I'm here. But forgiveness doesn't mean I belong to you. When he opened his eyes again, there was no anger left, only emptiness. He nodded slowly. You really love him, don't you? I hesitated, then said quietly, I do. For the first time, Ethan smiled genuinely. Good. Don't lose him like I lost you. I left the hospital that night feeling lighter than I expected. The moon hung low in the sky, silver and calm, like a witness to endings and beginnings. I didn't cry. I didn't grieve, because I'd already done that long ago. What I felt now was peace, the kind that comes when you finally realize your past can't hurt you anymore. When I got home, Noah was waiting by my door, leaning against the wall with his hands in his pockets. The moment I saw him, everything inside me settled. He's stable, I said softly. Noah nodded. And you? I took a breath, stepping closer. Free, he smiled, pulling me gently into his arms. Good, because I don't want to love a woman who still belongs to her pain. I rested my head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. You won't have to. That night, as we stood there beneath the city lights, I realized something simple but profound. Love isn't about who you cry for. It's about who makes you stop crying. And for me, that person was Noah. But just when I thought the past had finally released its hold, fate wasn't done with me yet. Because a week later, a truth would surface that would shatter everything I thought I knew about Ethan, about Noah, and about the reason I'd been given this second chance at all. The following week felt deceptively peaceful, like the calm before a storm you can't quite name. I spent my days at the office, finalizing the project with Noah, and my nights in the quiet comfort of knowing I'd finally let go of everything that once hurt me. Ethan was still recovering, and though I checked in once through a nurse, I didn't visit again. There was nothing left to say, but peace, I've learned, has a fragile heartbeat. It doesn't take much to stop it. One evening, as I was closing my laptop, Noah appeared at my desk, his expression unusually tense. Liana, he said quietly, can we talk? Privately. Something in his tone made my stomach twist. We went to the rooftop terrace, the same place where we'd once shared laughter and whispered dreams. Now, the silence between us felt heavy. He ran a hand through his hair, looking torn. There's something I should have told you earlier, but I didn't know how. My pulse quickened. What is it? He looked me straight in the eyes. Ethan. He wasn't just a random client to me. I knew him. Before I met you, I blinked, confused. What do you mean? He sighed deeply, his voice low. When I started at the firm, I took a project freelancing for a luxury development company. Ethan was on the board. He didn't mention your name, but he told me about his fiancée. Said she was talented, emotional, too idealistic. He mocked you, Liana. He called you a burden. The words hit me like a cold wave. My chest tightened, but he continued. At first, I didn't know it was you. Then, when I met you in person during the merger project, I realized who you were. I wanted to tell you right away, but you were still with him. You looked so broken, so trapped. I couldn't just come out and say I knew what he'd done. I thought if I stayed close, maybe I could help you see what you deserved. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The rooftop wind whipped around us, but all I could hear was the echo of Ethan's old laughter. Him mocking me behind closed doors, while I defended him to everyone. So, I said slowly, you knew who he was, and you still fell for you, Noah said quietly. Not because of what I knew about him, but because of who you were, despite it. I wanted to believe him, but the betrayal stung, not because he'd hurt me, but because it reminded me of how easily trust can turn into a trap. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. He stepped closer, his eyes full of regret. Because I didn't want you to see me as someone who pitied you. I didn't want to be another man who took away your choice. My throat ached. You should have told me anyway. Honesty isn't something you give when it's convenient, Noah. He nodded, swallowing hard. I know, and I'm sorry. I turned away needing space. My heart wasn't angry. It was tired. So tired of half-truths, of good intentions tangled with secrets. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of Ethan in that hospital bed replayed in my mind, his apology, his regret, and now this, Noah's confession, the two men who shaped my life in such different ways, both connected by lies. The next morning, I decided to visit Ethan one last time. I didn't tell Noah. I just needed clarity. When I entered his hospital room, he was sitting up, looking healthier. His eyes widened in surprise. Liana, he breathed. You came back. Don't read into it, I said, sitting down. I just have questions. He nodded, cautious. Ask, did you know Noah before all this? I asked bluntly. He hesitated for a split second, just long enough to tell me everything I needed to know. Yes, he admitted. I knew him. We did business. Why? I exhaled slowly. Did you know he was working on my project? He gave a faint smirk. Of course. I even recommended him. I thought he'd keep you grounded. My blood ran cold. You what? Ethan shrugged weakly. I knew he'd be around you, and I figured if anyone could make you stop resenting me, it'd be someone like him. I didn't think you'd actually fall for him. I stared at him in disbelief. So you manipulated both of us. Not manipulated, he said defensively. Just arranged. I laughed bitterly. You arranged your own downfall, Ethan. For a moment, silence. Then he looked at me, his eyes softening. Maybe I did, but tell me honestly, did he ever tell you he knew me first? That silence between us said it all. I left the hospital trembling, not from heartbreak, but from anger at fate's cruel sense of irony. Noah, my peace, my salvation, had been part of Ethan's orbit all along, even if unknowingly at first. It all felt like a cruel circle I'd been forced to run twice. When I confronted Noah that evening, his expression was devastated before I even said a word. You talked to him, he whispered. Yes, I said. And now I know the truth. He nodded slowly. Then you also know I never lied about how I feel. I know, I said softly. But I need to breathe, Noah. I need to know that this love, whatever it is, isn't just another version of my past, dressed in kindness. He didn't stop me when I turned to leave. He just said, I'll wait, even if it takes forever. For days I threw myself into work, into silence, into solitude. I needed to find my footing again. But life has a way of moving, even when your heart wants to pause. One evening, I received a message from the hospital. Ethan had taken a sudden turn for the worse. I froze, staring at the screen. Memories crashing over me like a tide I'd thought had long receded. Without thinking, I rushed there. When I arrived, he was awake but fading. His breathing was shallow, his eyes glassy. Liana, he whispered. You were the only thing I ever did right, even if I ruined it. Tears welled in my eyes despite everything. Stop talking, Ethan. You need to rest. He smiled faintly. Promise me something. What? Don't let my mistakes keep you from being happy again. Not with him. Not with anyone. Those were the last words he ever said to me. As the monitors flatlined, something inside me broke. Not from love, but from the finality of it all. I cried not for the man he was, but for the years I wasted loving who he could have been. And as I walked out of that hospital for the last time, I realized that sometimes rebirth doesn't mean getting a second chance with someone. It means getting a second chance without them. But fate still had one final twist in store for me, one that would turn my grief into the purest kind of clarity. The days after Ethan's passing were quiet but heavy, like the weight of a sky before a storm breaks. I felt numb, not because I didn't mourn him, but because I had learned something essential. Life moves forward, even when the people who hurt us leave behind echoes. My grief was tempered by relief. Relief that I no longer had to wait, hope, or forgive someone who couldn't love me fully. Noah didn't pressure me. He was there in small, meaningful ways. Coffee on my desk, a quiet message asking if I ate, a simple hand on my shoulder when he sensed my pain, and slowly, in the silence, I realized that my heart was capable of feeling again. Not fear, not desperation, not anxiety, but love. The kind of love that was patient, steady, unhurried, and safe. One evening, we walked along the river near my apartment. The city lights shimmered on the water, reflecting all the choices I had made. The mistakes, the pain, and the victories. Noah took my hand gently. "Liana," he said softly, "I don't want to rush you. I just want you to know I'm here. Completely. And I'm not going anywhere." I stopped and looked at him. The honesty in his eyes, the warmth in his hand, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat under my palm. It was everything I had been missing. And I realized then that I didn't need to chase him, plead for him, or test him. He was already the answer I had been looking for. I think I'm ready," I whispered. Ready to stop running. Ready to stop guarding my heart. His smile was gentle, almost reverent. "Then let's do this together. No past, no games, just us." And in that moment, I felt a rebirth unlike any other. I wasn't reborn to chase a man who didn't deserve me. I wasn't reborn to avenge, to mourn, or to prove anything. I was reborn to love freely, fully, and truly, with someone who respected my scars, cherished my soul, and stood beside me without conditions. We started building our life together slowly, carefully, savoring every ordinary moment, the laughter, the shared meals, the quiet evenings with books and music. Our love wasn't a whirlwind, but a steady flame, warm enough to light every corner of my being. Months later, I found myself in my studio, sketching a city made entirely of light. The vision I had once drawn as a child. Noah came in quietly, watching me with that same steady gaze that had always calmed my storms. "You've come a long way," he said softly. I smiled without looking up. I did, and I have someone who walks beside me now. He knelt beside me, lifting my hand to his lips. "I'm honored to walk beside you, and I promise I'll never take you for granted." As I looked into his eyes, I realized that every betrayal, every heartbreak, every tear had led me here. Not to vengeance, not to regret, but to this moment of pure clarity. My rebirth wasn't just leaving Ethan behind. It was claiming the love I truly deserved. And finally I understood. The strongest love isn't the one that hurts the most. It's the one that makes you feel safe, seen, and whole. I leaned against Noah's chest that night, listening to the steady beat of his heart. The world outside moved on, chaotic and relentless as always. But inside, in that quiet sanctuary we'd built together, I finally felt complete. I had been betrayed. I had suffered. I had cried. But in the end, I had chosen myself. And with that choice came a love that was patient, true, and unbreakable. The past had its lessons. The present had its peace. And the future, our future, was ours to create together. I smiled, closing my eyes, finally free, finally loved, and finally home. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment love, so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know, where are you watching from? Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button. Comment your thought and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, spread love.